Global economic collapse is taking place. I've gone through country after country disclosing the details, and today, without further ado, we are going to get into Australia. There's been a lot of demand for me to make a video on this, so I appreciate you hanging in there while I collected this data. Here are 5 reasons why Australia is facing an economic crisis. You came here for the truth, and so let me unveil that for you today. Balance sheet saw a substantial growth in the past year, says the RBA Stevens. RBA obviously being the equivalent to the Fed in the US. So right here they said the combined impact of replenished capital and the new financial market operations has seen a balance sheet swell, according to the Reserve Bank of Australia's annual report for 2014. They are engaging in the same exact policies that the Federal Reserve is doing, that all of the other central banks around the world are engaging in, and that is simply to print up money and to buy up useless debt instruments. And this is somehow going to drive the economy, but I will show you how in Australia today they are running into the same problems as the US and as the UK and Europe and other countries as well. Australia's money supply M3, so this is a broad spectrum for the money supply for anyone who isn't aware of that, but essentially they said it reached a record all-time high just a few months ago, and that is very telling. You can see in the graph that it is increasing month after month on average, and this is no different than other countries around the world. They need to keep this system going, and the only way they have is by printing money. And of course, some people call it credit expansion, some call it quantitative easing, whatever you want to call it. It is simply printing money out of thin air and handing it to the banks. Now, this right here is something that many analysts do not cover enough. This is probably the most important thing in all of the financial industry right now, and it is not getting enough attention even in the alternative news, but I'm going to be bringing it up more and more often. There are more countries that I haven't disclosed yet that are doing the same thing. So at the very beginning here at the top, it appears that there's a wide consensus that a bail-in would considerably expand the buffer, would further assist in the mechanisms for the protection of depositors, and importantly would create a system where it is less likely that the taxpayer will be dragged into the crisis. That's the Financial Systems Inquiry Chair David Murray. So let's just repeat myself here by he's saying that they want to do a bail-in because this is going to be better than a bailout. The bail-in, for anyone who doesn't know, is essentially what they did in Cyprus, and that is they took money directly out of the accounts of the people in Cyprus. They actually reached their hands in, used that money to recapitalize the banks, and they did this successfully, and this has now been the talk of the town on this channel, I assure you, because it is so important. As we watch country after country failing, we watch Europe dipping into the 3rd recession now. We're going to see bail-ins taking place all around the world. Many are very skeptical of this. However, number one, it has happened once before, and number two, they are setting up the foundation for these laws to be put into place, or regulations, won't even be a law, to put in place that they can go ahead and do this. We saw this in the 2013 report in Canada suggesting that they will do, the action plan said that they will have a bail-in regime. This also I disclosed in Germany, the same thing. In Australia, they also took dormant accounts from people, and it was only after a few years of so-called dormant, no activity on the account, that they took that away from people. 1 in 8 Australians are living in poverty, and this is big news right here out of Australia, saying that the ACOSS, that's the Australian Council of Social Service, says that the equates to 2.2 million people living below the poverty line in Australia, and close to 600,000 of them are children. Pretty shocking statistic. You know, a lot of the Western nations don't consider the fact that we have poverty, and this goes for Australia as well. Poverty is very big, and it is expanding as the economic crisis gets worse. I'll go on, and because this connects in, broke retirees take over Australia's caravan parks. And you could see this, how many of these individuals need to downsize and they need to reduce their costs, and they're doing this in this instance by moving into these caravan parks to find more affordable housing. That's something that's also an issue in Canada and other countries around the world, where real estate prices are booming so dramatically that it has gone against all of the economic forces. When you look at the income to the price of real estate ratio, you see everything is out of whack. So let's get into more information here. This is very important. The share of low wage paying jobs by country in 2013, you can see Australia is near the top of the list for this. And what this means is that they are not getting high paying jobs any longer because the Western nations ship their jobs overseas. You've heard me talk about this multiple times before, but it's a fact that Australia, just like the rest of the countries, Canada and the US included, have taken their jobs and forced them overseas. And now what we have are service-based jobs, retail jobs that pay a fraction of what the manufacturing jobs did. And a lot of the technical jobs, the information technology sector, are being pushed over into third world as well. So we're seeing a lot of jobs that should be in these countries, and of course they are no longer going to be there permanently. That is very important. Australia is paying the price for our reliance on exports. And this is the Business Spectator saying this. And this is a very important factor because you want to have exports. It is very important. But also you want to have domestic consumption, because when we have this globalized world, you want to have your own people buying your own things to stimulate the economy. That's the difference in China. What's happening right now is you have a lot of people moving into the cities, and that is spurring economic demand within the country itself. It makes a big difference. But let's stay on this article here. What they said, net exports, the main driver of growth earlier this year, have deteriorated sharply, and that is because of the economic struggles that we're seeing all around the world. The world is all connected, and they're relying on continuous more growth. But that doesn't work like that. There are periods, there are supposed to be periods of deflation. That is supposed to happen. It is healthy, but they're trying to fight against that, and they do so with their central banks. I talked about that at the beginning of the video, how the central bank just continues to pump that money in to keep that system going, when if there are hardships taking place, if there is a lack of exports, that's for a reason, and it should be allowed to happen for a period of time until the economic growth continues once again. It should not be artificial. This here is another issue, talking about consumer prices being increasing right now. Of course, that puts a big burden on the individual citizen. And they also said this: house prices, property prices, and vehicle charges also increased. That's what we're talking about when we have inflation. You're talking about your food, energy. You're talking about, in this case here, house, property, and vehicle charges all going to the upward direction, and this is not factored in often with their fake numbers that they give us. The inflation rates in here, I believe, is 2.3% according to their CPI, but we know that does not include everything. That doesn't factor in the cost of living expenses, and that is why these numbers that the government provides us with are inaccurate. In my book, I talked about Australia set to introduce the tax, a carbon tax that is, in 2012, which plans on reducing carbon emissions from manufacturing. briefing, and just want to say that they ended up scrapping this tax, thank goodness. These regulations make the West more poor and developing world more industrialized. Carbon taxes will be detrimental to the economies of those who are forced into this. I predicted that before it happened, and it was pretty obvious that when you put a tax on someone or a country, you will have growth that is slowed down. In Canada, we have carbon taxes indirectly on many of our items, and you can see this with they call it eco fees on certain products, and this right here doesn't do anything to save the economy at all. It just siphons more money into the government's hands, and that's what all taxation is essentially. Right here, this is the RBA discussing measures to cool the unbalanced housing market. And that's what we have, this statistic out of Bloomberg, just basically saying that there is a lot of investors pushing up the prices. This is happening in Asia as well. And this is right here what they said: the composition of housing and mortgage markets is becoming unbalanced, with new lending to investors being out of proportion to the rental housing share of the housing stock. And you're also seeing inflation rates in certain countries where they want to hold on to their wealth, and they do so by looking abroad. And Australia is one of those countries where individuals, for example, from China, are buying up the properties at record amounts. So this is because of something that's happening in their country affecting someone else's country, in this case Australia. And connected in with that is that foreigners buy 1 in 6 new Aussie homes. The highlighted portion says overseas buyers accounted for almost 17% of total demand for new properties. This foreign demand might be great for the economy as a whole, but you can look in it deeper from a different light and realize where is the domestic demand. And when their people in their own region are unable to afford the homes, this spells a crisis for the future. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any suggestions for other countries as well, I am always researching, always adding to my research database and collecting that information to do more videos like this. Please let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to become an insider. The Insiders is where I give out all my best intel for free, and that is available at themoneygps.com. Scroll down to the bottom and fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.